Yeah. So this is on a parajumbles. Okay. Now my advice to the parajumbles question is that, okay, that in case if you're not able to find out any links, okay, so we've done the links, we have done the pairs, okay, and in case if you're not able to figure out any links or pairs, okay, and in case the opening sentence also seems problematic to you, okay, you're not able to figure it out, then don't waste much of the time on the parajumbles, okay. The parajumbles is doable only when there are certain links that you can form, okay, such as on the basis of the use of pronouns, okay, or let's say different correlation words, okay, cause and effect words, or let's say the thought relieve this extender, or the thought, or which gives you the opposite contrast ideas, okay. So these kinds of things should be presented. In case if it's not presented, plus the opening sentence also talks about our is quite difficult to figure out, then that means that whatever you can feel it in one or fraction of seconds rather, I would say, okay, just mark it because it's a theta question, so you don't know when, you can be lucky about it, okay, but otherwise don't waste much of the time on these kinds of the question, okay. So let's see. A theory of ability can be reasonably expected to say what it is to have an ability in a way that vindicates the appearance of truth, okay. Can be a probable starter. It is not an option, at least at the outset, to dismiss all our talk of ability as fiction or outright falsehood. Can be a probability starter. When we ascribe abilities such as to compose a symphony to one another, we have the impression that we are making claims that are at least sometimes true, okay, can be the starter. The impression of truth exerts the pressure towards giving a philosophical theory of probability, probably a starter, okay. And I'm sure that once you started reading all these things, you'll be totally lost at what the author actually wants to say, okay. So you have double focus here on these all the sentences, okay. So yeah, so again, I would not have attempted this question, okay. But the 3 is actually the correct opening sentence, okay. I'll give you the reason why it is that, okay. So when we ascribe abilities, okay, such as to compose a symphony, okay, to one another, okay, we have the impression that we are making claims that are at least sometimes true, okay. Now the reason that why I'm gonna keep this 3 as an opening sentence is because it talks about people having abilities, okay, and then it is further with the help of a such as, it is actually kind of example, it's kind of exemplifying, okay, it's kind of defining that what does it means to ascribe ability, okay. So that is the reason, okay, that 3 can be an opening sentence because it is kind of explaining something, okay. But let's see, okay, when we ascribe abilities such as to compose a symphony, okay, to one another, okay, now this such as it's not that relevant, let's understand the idea. When we ascribe abilities, we have the impression that we are making claims that are at least sometimes true, okay. So there is a little bit of a truth element in it, okay. Now the next is actually the 4, okay. Now the reason that I have placed 3 and 4 together is that the impression of truth, okay, exerts a pressure towards giving a philosophical theory of ability, okay. Now what is this impression of truth, okay, that this see, can you see we have the impression, okay. So impression and impression link word here, okay. So we have the impression that we are making claims that are at least sometimes truth. Now this impression of truth, okay, exerts, okay, so this impression of truth, okay, and we have the impression that we are making claims that are at least sometimes true, okay. So 3 and 4, at least sometimes true in 3, okay, is the impression of truth, okay, which is highlighted in the 4, okay. An impression and impression keyword link, okay. So 3 4 is a link or the pair, okay. Now after 3 4, the one probability is either 2 1 or a 1 2, okay. And one go in case if we're going to read, both of them looks exactly correct, okay, but still we need to figure out, and the correct answer is kind of 3 4 2 1, okay. So let's see why after 4 2 will come, okay. The impression of truth exerts a pressure towards giving a philosophical theory of ability. It is not an option, okay. Now what is not an option, okay. So 2 can follow from 4, okay, because of this it is not an option, okay. The impression of truth actually exerts a pressure to put forth a theory, okay. So it is not an option because it put force, are you able to understand, like, okay, because it put force or it exerts a pressure, okay. So it is not an option, okay, at least at the outset, to dismiss all our talk ability as a fiction or outright falsehood, okay. See, the reason that the impression of truth actually exerts a pressure, okay, towards giving a philosophical theory of ability. So this is not an option to dismiss all our talk of ability as fiction or outright falsehood, okay, because it actually exerts a pressure, okay. So this is the cause and this is actually kind of an effect, okay. So that's the case, okay. So it is not an option, and 2 refers to the compulsion to have a philosophical theory of ability, because it actually kind of exerts pressure, okay. So it exerts pressure to give the theory or a philosophical theory of ability. So we cannot dismiss all our talks just like that, okay, or as a fiction or an outright falsehood, okay. We have to see further, we have to figure it out further, okay. So now the one, it will be the last sentence. I hope you got the logic of this 3 and 4 and 2, okay. So theory of ability can be reasonably expected to say what it is to have an ability in a way that vindicates the appearance of truth, okay. So kind of justify the appearance of truth. So this seems to be a more conclusion, okay. So 1 will follow from 2, okay. Since we cannot dismiss on the lack of ability as a falsehood, so a theory of ability should kind of justify the appearance of truth, okay, because since we cannot dismiss all our talk as falsehood, so there has to be some theory of ability which is kind of, let's say, supporting or justifying the appearance of the truth. So 3, 4, 2, 1 is the correct answer, okay. A pretty difficult para jumbles, okay, not suggested to be taken, okay, but still I want this paper to be difficult. And moreover, you should know, okay, you should get this idea, okay, which one to be picked and which one not to be picked, okay. So that's the case. I hope you got the logic also behind it, okay. You just not outrightly, just because it is difficult, you rejected it.